G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. In all the flurry of finals and trade rumours and stuff I've been doing on True Footy as well as Man Flu, I've realised I kind of dropped the ball a little bit on reflecting more on season 2024. So I thought, do a little bit more season review content, in particular focusing on players. Well, how exactly do I structure that? I'm going to blatantly rip off a video that Terry from Blue Abroad did on his channel, which is a Carlton fan channel if you're not aware, fantastic channel. Terry does a tier maker that I've blatantly ripped off here that I'm going to apply to the West Coast Eagles here. So we've got 45 players that played on the Eagles list in season 2024, and we're going to go through player by player and rank them into different categories. So you can follow along with me here. I've got a top category for who was an elite performer this year, a consistent contributor, the occasional impact. I've got a category here for development where players are just so young that it's hard to grade them on actual output, but we'll go through them and speak about them individually as well. And then we've got a category for players who genuinely fell short of expectation, of which I've got a few in mind. And then probably its own category for injured players who don't fit into any of these categories. So there's a lot of players to get through here. I say we just crack straight back into it. So where to start? Okay, Elijah Hewitt I'm going to put in injured. He didn't play a single game this year. Rhett Bazzo played one game this year. We can probably trim the fat a little bit. Maybe let's go one in each category from this point on. So Andrew Gaff here, bless him, champion of the game. But let's be real in terms of expectation. Gaffy got dropped and eventually retired. So don't need to harp on too much about that. But, I think that's a fair assessment that he wasn't quite cutting the mustard at AFL level and probably hasn't been for a little bit of time. A player who was genuinely in development, Jordan Baker. Look, he had an okay year in the waffle. Sounds like he is okay at a lot of things, decent one-on-one, decent run and carry, had some moments this year. Again, not sure if he's going to get another contract. Seems unlikely if it hasn't been announced at this point. But nonetheless, didn't really do too much wrong without really getting close to the team. So I think probably classic example of development player there. Who had, maybe we'll go to our elite performers. This one might be a little bit easier because there's probably two that come to mind. So Jake Waterman goes into elite performer. He had an unbelievable season. Much has been said of that. To do what this guy did, considering the health issues he faced at the end of last year, to have a breakout season, but not only be like a locked-in best 22 player, he became one of the best forwards in the competition and was fairly consistent as well in the team that barely got the ball inside 50. So there's so much to be said about Jake Waterman, and I will also put Jeremy McGovern in that list. As soon as my beady little eyes find him here in this list, there he is. Absolute champ, Jeremy McGovern. And statistically, I think his best season in 6 years, according to Champion Data. And it's great to see that, once his body allowed him to play consistent footy, I'd imagine, he'll go close to being our best and fairest this year. Only played the 19 games, but previous 2 years have been, heavily affected by injury. Tommy Barras, I'll probably put as consistent contributor. Obviously, he probably played his last game for the mighty Eagles, but consistently good without really threatening, all Australian calculations. I'd put him in the category below Waterman and McGovern. I'd say those are probably the only two elite contributors or elite performers this year. And Tommy Barras probably absolutely qualifies as being a consistent contributor. I think from memory, a bit of a slow start to the year, but very defensively sound. And we really felt the difference when both Gov and TB were playing together. I thought they worked together arguably better in unison this year than we've seen for some time. To be fair, more often than not, we've had to deal with one of them being in the team, not both. Who is a player that had occasional impact this year? I'd probably be looking at, maybe Oscar Allen, to be honest. Again, you could almost put him in consistent contributor, but that's probably over-egging it a little bit, considering, he missed half a season with injury and, had games where he'd bob up and kick a couple, even though he wasn't impacting a lot. So I probably wouldn't go consistent contributor, but I think his output was pretty decent considering he was underdone. He kicked a bag of 5 at the end of the year and generally stood up for at least a few moments per game. So I think considering his position, playing deep forward in a rubbish team, I'm pretty positive what Oscar Allen was able to do. And, with the benefit of a preseason next year, I'd imagine he gets back to his best pretty soon. Tommy Cole, probably occasional impact. I don't think he was particularly poor. I think he had moments where he was good. Probably had some moments he'd rather have back. It's hard to assess, a small to medium defender on consistency. You don't necessarily expect Tom Cole to be racking up 20 plus every game. It's not quite his role. He's a bit more accountable than that. I don't think it was his best season, but, I think he had the occasional impact. I think that category is fair. What What about Jack Darling? You probably put him in fell short of expectation. Only kicked about a goal a game. Probably, while he had some good games, there were probably a lot of games where, it was unclear what he was really offering. So I think occasional impact, which is really the only other one you'd have him here, would probably be a little bit generous for Jack Darling. And when you say expectation, considering his age, probably should have low expectations, but I think fell short of expectation is the only right category here for Darling. We'll probably group in a few of these younger guys here. So Jai Cully I put in development because obviously he's young. He's the same age as Campbell Chesser, but obviously recovering from an ACL this year, came back and did pretty much, as much as we could really realistically have expected from him. Played well in the waffle, earned a spot back. Didn't keep that spot. I think he came in and out of the side. I think he constitutes development at this stage. You'd probably put Tyrell Dewar in that category as well. Again, I really like what I see from him. I think he's got bucket loads of talent, but, probably one of a bunch of players, including Clay Hall, that fall into this category of, having not played enough games. Same thing with Jack Hutchinson. We're going to group all these guys together because while there's been good flashes from each of them, in particular Dewar and to some extent Hutchinson, Hall probably has had more of a taste without really standing out. These guys are probably too difficult to assess other than to say, A, it's good that they've debuted, and B, it's good that they've shown different levels of flashes in games. Now, I should clarify that just because a player is young, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to put them in development. Okay, I think it is possible for a youngster to transcend development and to go into occasional impact. And for instance, that might be Jack Williams. Where did I see Jack Williams a second ago? Here we go. Jack Williams probably transcends development. I'm saying that he's played better than we expected and had an occasional impact and a really profound one. He certainly wasn't a consistent contributor, but towards the end of the year, I think he transcended merely being a development player, and therefore I'm going to be flattering with Jack Williams there. By contrast, who's a developing player that probably fell short of expectation? Maybe a Harry Barnett. Now, Harry Barnett started the year, in round 2 he played as a ruckman in our AFL side. By the end of the waffle season, he was getting 2, 3, 4 disposal games. I think it's fair to suggest that even though he's in the development category and contracted, and I'm not writing him off, I think it was a disappointing year on the actual output that he had. So on that logic, if you've probably achieved the status quo as a youngster, someone like a Locke Rawlinson, you probably go back into development. Now, he played one game and played an okay year in the waffle, certainly not transcending the development category, but also not falling short of expectation and has been rewarded with another 1-year extension. Just spotted Callum Jamieson here again. He started the year, I think, playing a little bit of key back and then has been injured for the rest of it. I don't think we've learned enough about Cal Jamieson to put him in any other category here. I think we saw some positive signs, in the few games that he played, but honestly, it's still very much a question mark. Out of contract next year. Fingers crossed he has a good preseason and makes it as a key back. Bergiel is an interesting one. I'd probably put him in development. You could make the case that he hasn't quite come on, and perhaps I personally had wanted him to do better. I was kind of bullish in the preseason that we'd see him earn a spot in this team, and hasn't really earned it, but he also wasn't terrible in the waffle. It's just that he didn't quite make the most of his opportunities. Luke Edwards, again, I want to be sensitive to the fact that he, has some concussion injuries at the moment, but honestly, for a player of his experience, again, I think he was probably playing in the wrong role, but again, really didn't have I wouldn't even say he had an occasional impact this year. I think he was very much a non-entity. I say that with respect, I wish him all the best, but I'd imagine even fully fit, I think Luke Edwards has probably played his last game for West Coast. So again, wishing him all the best in his recovery from those concussion injuries, seriously, but there is absolutely no other category for Luke there. So we'll move on. We've gone heavy on the development and fall short of expectations. So let's move to maybe another consistent contributor. I'd probably put Liam Duggan in this category. Again, probably stood out for some howlers this year with the occasional error. But if you're looking for a standard to which you want to hold players to in terms of effort, work rate, and really trying to bleed for this football club, I think Liam Duggan has that, even if he doesn't have the same polish. I think Doug tried his guts out in a team that really lacked players doing that this year. And therefore, I'm going to give him that credit. He certainly wasn't an elite performer, but I'd say he was far beyond occasional impact. I think he was important for us this year, even if, bless him, he frustrated me at times this year. What about Ruben Jinbi? I'd probably put him in occasional impact. Now, again, you could say, was he a second-year player, isn't he? You could say he has transcended development. Towards the back end of the year, he started to flirt with this consistent contributor thing. I particularly remember his game against the Gold Coast Suns where he was a rock in defense, and very happy with that development, but it did come late. And he did spend a lot of the year, at stoppages in the midfield and, probably having an occasional impact. So I think on the mean average, he's an occasional impact, but you consider he is the same age and in fact younger than a Jai Cully and certainly a Jack Hutchinson there. So, in a way, that's a really positive season for Rubes. And I think next year, defensive halfback, maybe a little bit of wing is probably his calling. And I would not be surprised to see him in consistent contributor 12 months from now, that's for sure. Brady Hough probably does go to consistent contributor. I think week in, week out, he was super reliable. I don't think he played a single bad game this year. Maybe there was one, I don't remember. But he has become that rock solid, dependable, medium-sized, small defender. And again, credit where it's due. Taking him out of nowhere at pick 31 in the 2021 draft. Great selection and very, very happy we have him on our list. Just a few more to clean up here. I guess Cohen Livingston you put in development. Again, solid season in the waffle. 18-year-old or turning 19 this year. Ruck forward prospect. Had some decent games. Again, pretty unsupported in that waffle team. I think we're pretty happy with the way Cohen's going. Fair way off the team at the moment, but who knows after a pre-season. Could he bob up for a few games next year? I'm not ruling him out of that. So again, rewarded with a 1-year extension, I think, Cohen Livingston. And that's good to see. That's good to see. What about Matthew Flynn? Is it too harsh to say fell short of expectation? I think maybe this is harsh. I know he spent half the year injured and, probably... Oh, did he have a preseason? I think he might have had a preseason, then got injured, probably lost a lot of that. Didn't have an impact at AFL level, but also in the waffle wasn't, winning one-on-one ruck contests a lot. I think he was losing a lot of hit-out counts. I think it's fair to say he fell short of our expectations this year. Probably put Josh Rotham in this category again. Very minimal impact from a guy who's played, I don't even know, nearly 100 games, probably a little bit less at AFL level. Probably not going to play again at the West Coast Eagles and fell out of favour towards the end of the year. So, again, probably a little bit of a wasted talent to some extent. I think when we got Rotham and he debuted, I think it was against Collingwood in 2019, I thought, gee, we got a player here. But, very limited impact on the current team and the setup. So I think we've probably seen the last of Josh Rotham at West Coast. Jaden Hunt, I'd probably put it in occasional impact. I think he was pretty good. By contrast, I think in 2023, he was definitely up in this consistent contributor category. There was a lot more quiet games by contrast. And I think there was a little bit of a role change there. I think when he tended to go back this year, he'd find a little bit more of the footy. When he'd play on the wing, he'd get a little bit lost. So somewhere between these two categories for Jaden Hunt. I'm going to put Noah Long in injured. He played 8 games or something like that, or round 8. I think he got injured against Essendon. He didn't play after that. It would either be development or injured. Didn't have a really great start to the year. Still trying to lift those possession counts, but I think on balance, the injury was the biggest narrative out of his year, and hopefully he has a good preseason. I am going to put Dom Sheed in fell short of expectations. So we've got a few players racking up there, and a lot of those won't be on the list next year. With the exception of Dom Sheed, who I know got injured, but it's a bit harsh perhaps to suggest that he fell short of expectation when he's been so injury crippled, but when he came back into the side, he wasn't good, and then in the waffle, didn't really demand a spot either. And I think outside of the injury, we can expect a little bit more from Dom Sheed, so I think that's fair. Elliot Yeo was a consistent contributor, even in games where you wouldn't notice him this year, he was getting his 8 clearances, 8 tackles. He certainly wasn't elite. At times, he flirted with elite earlier in the season, fell away a little bit, but generally speaking, we're very happy to have an inside mid like Elliot Yeo, and I do cringe at the possibility that we don't have the same injury run with Kelly Yeo and Reed next year. I'm going to possibly be a little bit harsh on Bailey Williams here. It would either be occasional impact or fell short of expectation. I don't think he really had even an occasional impact this year. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but we were far and away the worst hit-out to advantage and hit-out team in the competition this year. And I just think Bailey, and again, not to write him off, I'm certainly not writing him off. He's a young ruck. These guys do take time, and it's not always linear development, but he definitely took a step back from last season where I thought he was a little bit better, and I'll back him in to improve and be better, but I think he was a little bit behind what we were hoping for this year, and our ruck situation was not good. Tyler Brockman also was has had a disappointing start to his time at West Coast. So start of the year, I think he played the first 6 or something like that, got into trouble, went back to the waffle, played well, came back into the side, played well again, faded a little bit, got injured to end the year. So overall, I think Brockman, you could probably put in development, to be honest, as well, now that I think about it, because he is the same age as a Jai Cully, I think. Oh no, he's a year older. So it's a little bit blurry in the lines there, but I think we were a little bit more hopeful that Brockman had what it took to entrench himself straight into our 22. Came with a lot of raps from Hawthorn, played a lot of footy there. but ultimately fell out of our best 22 and I don't think starts next year in that best 22, so it's fair to suggest fell short of expectations. Jamie Cripps, perhaps generously, I'm going to put in occasional impact again. When you consider expectations, I do think he was a fair bit better than Gaff and Darling, and Gaff and Darling are in the same age, so we temper that expectation because he's a veteran. And I don't think he was consistent, nor do I think he was extremely poor. I think there were moments where Jamie Cripps was great, kicked the winning goal against Gold Coast, definitely had some good games, but I think he's getting a little bit further and further from his best footy, and probably 2025 shapes as his last season, but on balance, added a little bit to this team. We'll see if he keeps his spot as 2025 progresses. We'll continue to move through a few development guys. Harvey Johnston was, really pleasing to see. He goes into development because he wasn't quite in occasional impact, but he probably exceeded my expectations, to be honest. I think he's got some AFL traits. If he can have a good pre-season, build himself physically, win a little bit more of the footy next year, I think we've got a player on our hands there. So very happy to have him. Harley Reed also, came to the team with a partial ACL tear. Didn't have a pre-season, came into the side at waffle level and kicked a couple of goals a game pretty consistently and generally speaking from the eye test, impacted really well. And I think, again, we got a player there, but you wouldn't put him in any other category. Jermaine Jones fell short of expectation, a couple of years off being, the best version of Jermaine Jones probably had a future at AFL level and we're, probably not impacting much over the last year or two. I believe he signed with South Fremantle, and while he hasn't been formally delisted yet, it seems like it's a matter of time. Tim Kelly probably wasn't... was he a consistent contributor? I don't know. That's a tough one, actually, TK. Because he was somewhat consistent, but also frustratingly inconsistent. Does that make sense? I think we just hold him to a higher standard here, and I certainly probably wouldn't put him on the same level as Elliot Yeo. Let's go to occasional impact. He was disappointing for periods this season. Again, I would say a forward that benefits more when there's midfielders, doing the hard work and helping him flourish on the outside. Well, 2023, he didn't have that, and he was a fantastic workhorse midfielder. This year, he had at least Yeo and Reed to support him. And probably his output dropped. So I'm going to say occasional impact. I think TK can improve on his season in 2024. Petruccelli, I think, fell short of expectation. Petruccelli probably fell short of expectation this year. I think for his age and experience. I know there was some injury involved there, but I can't really remember too many games Petruccelli impacted at AFL level. Out of contract at the end of next year, will be a free agent. I think still has some value. I definitely don't think he's on the D-list pile for 12 months from now, but he's got to have a better year next year to earn a spot on this list. But some talent there. I was just hoping for a little bit more from Petruccelli this year. I'm not really sure where to categorise Zane True. I think you'd be really harsh to put him in, fell short of expectations. I mean, he earned a spot back in the team, played a bit of a role, wasn't super impactful. He probably goes in the development category. Now, I think he's about the same age as Brockman. So am I being harsh there on Brockman and generous on Zane True? Possibly. For the record, I think if I had to keep one going into next year, I would say Brockman, probably a little bit more potential. And maybe that's why I mark him a little bit more harshly. I suppose that one is a little bit hard to reconcile, but I don't think Zane True fell short of expectation. I think Brockman did. So I think that's probably fair, right? I'm not sure if Zane True is going to play on next year, but I wouldn't say he fell short of expectation, and occasional impact is probably, he certainly wasn't on the level of any of these guys. Witherden probably fell short of expectation this year. Wasn't horrible, but, not great defensively. Made a lot of mistakes, gave away a lot of frees. And the standard that we hold him to is a 100-game player. Okay, so occasional impact, I think, would be generous. I don't think he was horrific, and there is a chance he stays on next year, considering our need for defensive depth. But his impact wasn't great this year, and I think probably on the D-list pile. Liam Ryan probably goes in occasional impact. Again, I think he missed a lot of footy in the preseason due to injury. But I think when he worked back into the team, I think he had moments where he was really impactful in the midfield. Didn't kick a lot of goals. I don't think that's really his jam anymore. I think he's a bit more of a high half forward who can rotate through the midfield. Definitely not consistent, but not bad. Harry Edwards, I'd probably put an occasional impact now, probably past the development stage. And, had to step up in moments where we, not too many times, but we were sometimes missing one of Gov and TB, or sometimes he would be that third tall defender. And I think we've seen it enough to suggest he can probably play at AFL level. Ryan Marrick probably goes in development as well. Again, I'm trying to think how old he is. I think he's the same age as Jinby and Hewitt, as being a mid-season draftee. So young enough to be able to probably justifying this. Again, I think a very clear AFL level talent, been moved around a bit, and I think did very well considering the role he had, or at least the fact that his role kept changing, and I think that would have been difficult for him to perform consistently. I think he had his moments, probably not quite on the occasional impact level, but I'm very bullish about the future of Ryan Marrick, so a good development year for him. Campbell Chess is a tough one here for me. I'm inclined to put him in development, but again, I don't want to seem like I'm being harsh on Brockman, who is a year older than Chesser, and being too generous on Chesser. Fell short of expectation, probably. Look, he is a first-round draft pick. I think he is coming from a long way back, missed a lot of football, and I think playing in a tough role in a team that is not supporting him that well. That being said, first-round draft pick, has played about 30 games now. I think he's actually looking good with the ball. He's just not getting a lot of the ball. So I think if I'm being fair there, probably need to hold him to the same standard. I think he can still make it. I don't know if wing halfback is his role. Maybe he's an inside mid. Probably needs to learn how to find more of the footy for a start. But that's probably, if we're being really fair, I think Chesser fell slightly short of expectations. Hopefully he has a big year in 25. And I actually didn't mean to do this, but Harley Reed's left. I think we put him in consistent contributor. Now, you could make the argument that he wasn't super consistent, and there was a big gap between his best and his worst, but I think occasional impact is certainly not giving him enough credits. He's definitely higher than occasional impact, and his top-level performances were elite. To be honest, I think there were a lot of quiet games where Harley still impacted, and I think if you've got a superstar talent like that, you take that, especially when they're 19. I think consistent contributor is worth it. I think that's right for Harley Reed. I think he was pretty consistent, obviously not perfectly consistent. Big gap between his best and his worst, but his worst wasn't bad either. At his worst games, he might have 14 possessions and still have a few nice moments, laying tackles and winning clearances and breaking up play with his fend-offs and stuff like that. So again, for holding him to a fair standard, he certainly wasn't elite, but he certainly transcended occasional impact. So there you have it, guys. Let me know in the comments what you thought of those assessments. Had to be kind of brief on each player. Do you think I was fair? I've got another video idea to do a tier maker in the same format or similar format, where I categorize players based on how important they are to our list build. We're going to keep an eye out for that in the next week or so. But let me know in the comments what you thought of these brief season reviews, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.